you made it to Friday. Today we're going to be continuing graphing lines, and we're going to look at part 2 and finish the notes on graphing lines. But first we're going to go over our bell work. So a hot air balloon is 1,800 feet in the air when it begins descending. It descends at a rate of 120 feet per minute. So we need to write an equation to represent the problem. So when we see the word descends, I hope you know that that means it's going to be negative because we're going down. And then we see this word per, so we know that's going to be our slope. What is changing? We're told that we start at 180 feet, and we're not given any variables, so we're going to make up our own. And I like to stick with the y equals mx plus b. So we're going to make y equal our height, and then x is going to equal our minutes. So our equation is going to look like this. Y equals negative 120x plus 1,800. Now 1,800 is our y-intercept, because that's where we start before we start descending, before any time has passed. So we're also told that we need to find the intercepts for our equation and explain what they mean. So in order to find our x-intercept, remember we just plug in a 0 for y. So now we have 0 equals negative 120x plus 1,800. And then we have negative 1,800 equals negative 120x. So when we solve for x, we get positive 15 minutes. So what this means is the hot air balloon will be on the ground and be done descending after 15 minutes. Now we need to find our intercept for our y equation, and all we would do there is we plug in a 0 for x. So we would have y equals 1,800. And what our y-intercept means is our height before we started descending. So before 0 minutes have passed, haven't done any moving down yet, we're at 1,800 feet. But for number 2 here, we're going to be simplifying two monomials that we're multiplying together. Remember, our first step is to multiply our coefficients. So we get negative 15. And remember, when we have exponents and we're multiplying, that we have to apply the product rule, which just means we're adding our exponents together. So 3 plus negative 2 gives us 1. So I have negative 15x. And then I have 4 plus negative 4, which gives us a 0. So I have negative 15x y to the 0. And we know when anything is to a 0 power exponent, it cancels out. So we're just left with negative 15x. And finally, we're solving a proportional equation. And remember, when we have a proportional equation, we cross multiply and then solve it like a regular equation. So I have 8x plus 24 equals 10x minus 5. I'm going to move my 10x over to the other side. And I have negative 2x plus 24 equals negative 5. I'm going to subtract my 24. And I'm left with negative 2x equals negative 29. Divide both sides by negative 2. So I get x equals 29 over 2. Positive 29 over 2, because a negative divided by a negative gives us a positive. Now, questions 2 and 3 were probably really helpful for our benchmark that you will be taking coming up next week. All right, so just a reminder that next Thursday, October 3rd, you are going to be taking your approaching proficiency quiz. And then you're going to take that benchmark. Remember, it's just 10 questions over polynomials and equations and inequalities on Friday, October 4th. And then you're on fall break. So we're going to be continuing to work on graphing lines here. And if you have any questions about your intercept scavenger hunt, I've linked the answer key there for you to look at. And then right here, what you're watching right now, is the graphing lines part 2 video. And then I've got our homework questions, and there will be some IXLs that you can look at. So let's jump on into our packets. We're still working on approaching proficiency skills. We're going to be looking at using X and Y intercepts and graphing horizontal and vertical lines today. So you are going to be on page 4 of your green packet right at the top. We're on method 3, use the X and Y intercepts. So the x-intercept of a graph is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. Therefore, the y-coordinate is equal to 0. The y-intercept of a graph is the point where the line crosses the x-axis. Therefore, the x-coordinate equals 0. So to find the x-intercept, we're going to substitute 0 in for y and solve for x. To find the y-intercept, we're going to substitute 0 in for x and solve for y. We're going to write both intercepts as ordered pairs, and then we're going to graph. So for our first example right here, we have 2x minus 3y equals 6, and we're going to find our intercept. So remember, to find our x-intercept, we plug in a 0 for y. So now we have 2x equals 6, and then we see that x equals 3. So my coordinate for my x-intercept is 3, 0. And I'm going to plot that right here on the x-axis. Go over to 3, and it's just going to stay right on the axis. Now for y, we're going to plug in a 0 for x, and then we're left with negative 3y equals 6. And then we see that y equals a negative 2. So I'm going to have a 0 for my x for this coordinate and a negative 2 for my y. I'm going to come over here to the x-axis and go down 2 on my y-axis. And I'm just going to connect my dots, draw my line. Woohoo! We drew a graph for the equation 2x minus 3y equals 6. Now we're going to come over here and look at the second example. We've got 3x plus 4y equals a negative 12, and we're going to find our x-intercept. Remember, we're going to plug in a 0 for y, so we're left with 3x equals negative 12. Well, we divide both sides by 3, and we figure out that our x-intercept is negative 4. So I'm going to write it as the ordered pair, negative 4, 0. So I'm going to come over here to my negative 4 on the x-axis, and I'm going to plot my point. Now to solve for the y, I'm going to plug in a 0 for x, so I'm left with 4y equals negative 12. Divide both sides by 4, and I get that y equals negative 3. So my coordinates for my y-intercept are 0, negative 3. And then I just connect my lines. And I've got another pretty line. So as just a wrap up for this, all you do when you are using your x and y intercepts is you plug in a 0 for y and get your x-intercept. Plug in a 0 for x to get your y-intercept, and just plot those points and connect them. Well, now we're going to look at graphing horizontal and vertical lines. Now, to graph horizontal lines, we know that they are parallel to the x-axis. Their equations are in the form y equals a number. And a nice way to remember this is HOI. Horizontal, 0 slope, y equals a number. Remember, a horizontal line has 0 slope. So HOI, horizontal, 0 slope, y. We're going to graph the lines y equals 4 and y equals negative 3. So I'm going to come over here to y equals 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Plot my point. Oh, looky here, a horizontal line. So the line of this slope, y equals 3, is 0. And then I come over here to y equals negative 3. Another horizontal line. And since they're both horizontal, they're both parallel lines, so they have the same slope, which is 0. So what is the equation of the x-axis? So the equation of the x-axis, what's our y-coordinate here? 0. So our equation for the x-axis is y equals 0. Y equals 0. So just to recap, horizontal, 0 slope, y equals a number. So horizontal, 0 slope, y equals a number. Well, now we're going to look at vertical. And vertical lines are lines that are parallel to the y-axis. So they go up and down. The equations are in the form x equals a number. And this one doesn't sound as good as hoy. It's vertical, undefined slope, and x equals a number. Kind of like my last name, the x is silent here. So vertical, undefined slope, x equals a number. So we're going to graph the lines x equals 3 and then x equals -2. So I come over here to the x-axis, plot my point at 3, and I see that I have a vertical line. And then I do the same here for x equals -2, plot my point, and I have another vertical line. So this equation is telling us what the x-coordinate must equal. I've got 2 vertical lines, and what do we know about the slope of vertical lines? They're undefined, and then x equals a number. So for vertical lines, undefined slope, x equals a number. So what is the equation of the y-axis? So if we come here for the y-axis, x equals 0. X equals 0. All right, now for some practice here. You need to finish those worksheets if you have not already. Remember, they're due on Monday. And then we've got these 4 IXLs, and you need to get these scores up to 60. Have a great weekend.